class. Now, we're going through God's Word, the Bible. We're looking at each book, all the way from Genesis through Revelation, and we're picking out the keys, the main points that help us to understand God, help us to understand what we need to do to relate to God, to obey God, and helps us to understand the Christian life. Now, I have picked out these keys, and I'm asking you to form word pictures for these keys. Now, for example, when I'm trying to remember a person's name, let's say that your name is Bobby. Okay, your name is Bobby. And my wife and I have done a lot of traveling. We have been to England on more than one occasion, and we have seen those Bobbies. We call them policemen, but over there they call them Bobbies. So if I met you and your name is Bobby, I would picture you dressed like one of those London bobbies, London policemen, and maybe you're larger than life, maybe you got a big beard, or maybe something odd about you. I try to make the picture as odd as possible, and that odd picture helps me to remember your name. You see, that's the way our mind works. Our mind tends to remember things that are a little bit different. Maybe when you went fishing. Now, this is an area that we do a lot of fishing here. We've got several lakes in this area. This is Lake Catherine, and we got right now several people fishing. And maybe you've been on many fishing trips, but the one you remember most is the one that you tripped and fell into the water and got all wet, okay? And maybe you got out, you stood up in the boat and you fell out of the boat. That's the one you remember because that's odd. That's what we're doing here with God's Word. We're trying to form word pictures to help us to remember the top 10 keys to each book. Each book will have no more than 10 keys. Several books will only have maybe 4, 5, or 6 keys. We're only remembering those key stories, those key events that help us to understand God, help us to understand His love, and help us to understand the Christian life. Now, we're up to key number 5. We looked at the first 4 keys of the book of Exodus last night. Now we're ready to look at key number 5. Key number 5 is associated with the last plague. Remember, Pharaoh does not want to let the Hebrew nation leave. They're working as slaves for him, doing all his building projects, and he doesn't want to lose that free labor. So God sends these plagues, these 10 plagues, and actually each plague is an attack upon a different false god, an idol of Egypt, showing that God is more powerful than those false gods. The very last one, the very last plague, is the death angel plague. And to protect the Hebrew nation, God gave them what we call the Passover. So key number 5 is the Passover. Now, if they made the proper preparations, the death angel would pass over them and not strike the firstborn. If the death angel did not see the proper preparations being made, he would strike the firstborn, and the firstborn would die. Even the firstborn of Pharaoh, his own household, suffered that death. Now, what was the preparations? They were to prepare a Passover lamb, and a certain way to prepare it. There were certain other ingredients that went with the Passover lamb. They would prepare this lamb in a certain way. They were to take the blood and put the blood on the doorpost. The doorpost that went into their house. And when the death angel saw the blood on the doorposts of the house, he would pass over them. So key number 5 is Passover. The requirements and how to do the meal and how to do all that is found in Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. Now, with that plague, Pharaoh finally says, okay, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let the Hebrew nation go. So the Hebrew nation gathers up, and they gather up all their belongings, and actually the Egyptians, they want them to leave, so they're giving things to them, just get out of our country. We don't want to see you anymore. And we see the march of this great and mighty in number nation as they leave Egypt. But Pharaoh has a change of mind. He starts thinking, well, I'm giving up all this free labor. And who's going to do the work? All that's going to be left is our just Egyptians, and we're losing our free labor. So he orders his army together with him, and they pursue the Hebrew nation. Now, we've got the Hebrew nation at the river. We're not for sure, exactly which area this is. There's different opinions on where we are, in the northern part of Egypt, or maybe a little bit further south there in Egypt. But we're up to the river. And we've got the river there on one side of them. We've got the hills, and we got the Egyptian army coming, and we're in a box. The Hebrew nation is in trouble. But what happens? Let's look at Exodus chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14, verse 10. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone, so that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." The people, they have no hope. They've given up hope. And Moses said to the people, "Fear not. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you will only have to be silent." God working through Moses. What happens? They part the water. They part the water. Key number 6 is the parting, or you may want to put down the word crossing. I actually use the word crossing, but you may say the word parting, the parting of the water. And God will, in a mighty way, will separate the waters, and there'll be dry land. And the nation of the Hebrew nation, the nation of Israel, will walk across on dry land. The Egyptian army, they think, well, we can do that too. We can follow them on this dry land. So they pursue, and what happens? The water comes back down and drowns the Egyptian army. Now, we're on the other side. We're on the way to the promised land. God has promised his people a promised land, a land of milk and honey, a wonderful land. But what are they doing? They're complaining, they're complaining about the food. So God gives them bread from heaven. We call that manna. He gives them manna. He also gives them quail to eat. They're complaining about the water. So Moses he's instructed by God to strike the rock, and water comes out of a rock. They complain. In fact, the people complain a lot. And God still puts up with them. He still puts up with these people. Now, we also have Moses getting back with his father-in-law, Jethro. His father-in-law gives him some advice. Moses, you are weighing yourself down with too many responsibilities, having to make all these judgment calls. You need some people to help you. You need some elders, some older men to help you to judge all these smaller matters, and you can then judge the bigger matters. So that's what Moses actually does. That brings us up to key number 7. Key number 7 is the law. The giving of the law. It starts in Exodus chapter 20. It will continue there for several chapters. We have what we commonly call the 10 Commandments. We have much more than just the 10 Commandments there. We have the giving of the law concerning worship, the construction of the tabernacle, the construction of the ark, all that's there. So we have a lot of instructions from God. This is God's law. Remember, God is dealing with some people that for hundreds and hundreds of years had been slaves in Egypt. They didn't know how to take care of themselves. In fact, God even has to create dietary laws and laws of how to clean yourself, and laws for their proper medical care. He has to give them all that because they have no idea of even how to take care of themselves. So that's the law. That is number 7, the giving of the law. So I had painted me a picture. I kind of borrowed a scene from the movie The Ten Commandments there, and with that great movie. And I've got Moses, and his beard comes all the way down the ground, and it rolls around on the ground for a long distance. And I've got him holding the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and he is a much bigger than life person. I try to make his look to be a little bit odd. I got that, as I said, that beard coming all the way down on the ground, and it goes for several feet on the ground. That helps me to remember this key. Key number 7 is law. Key number 8 is the golden calf. The golden calf. That's found in Exodus chapter 32. Exodus chapter 32 is the story of the golden calf. Let's look at that story. Verse 1. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods. You make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So Aaron said to them, "Take off the rings of gold that are in the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me. Bring me the gold." So all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and he made a golden calf. Reminds us of one of the idols there in Egypt. He made a golden calf, and they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We have the golden calf. That is key number 8. Key number 8 for me is the golden calf, which brings us up then, because we know the story. Moses comes down, he breaks the tablets because they have been sinning. They're sinning, they're worshiping an idol. He has to go back, he has to actually create the tablets himself, and God actually gives them the law again. Now, that brings us up to key number 9. We already have the instructions for the tabernacle, but I have made key number 9 the tabernacle, because that's in Exodus chapter 35 and chapter 36. We have the creation of the tabernacle. That is a movable tent that God will use as his way for the people to worship him. Now, that is the creation of the tabernacle. And the people, they give to create this, and it's a wonderful outpouring of generosity. And the people are there, and they create this building of the tabernacle. So I've got a picture of the tabernacle. Once again, a little bit odd, a little bit strange picture, but it helps me to remember key number 9. Key number 10 is the ark. The ark, we already have the instructions on how to build it. In Exodus 37, we have the construction of the ark. We have the construction of the ark. That is key number 10 for me. Now, let me give you a summary for the book of Exodus. The summary for the book of Exodus for me is God keeps his promises. You can be assured that God keeps his promises. If you want to spend some time reading, let me give you 20 minutes of reading. Read chapters 1, 2, and 3, chapter 11 and 12, and chapters 19 and 20 of this book. You'll get a pretty good feel for the book right there. Now, let me give you the new question for Exodus, and then let me answer the question from Genesis. Here's the question from Exodus. What is the significance of the annual Passover feast? Now, what is the significance of the annual Passover feast? Go into some detail. Do a little research, do a little digging, and tell me what is the significance of the annual Passover feast. Now, the question from Genesis was this: what is a covenant, And how was God's covenant with Abraham different than most? Well, a covenant is an agreement. Usually it's an agreement that's initiated by a lesser with a greater, a lesser nation with a greater nation, a person of lower standing with a person of higher standing. Usually the person of lower standing initiates the covenant because it's going to be to his advantage because he's dealing with someone of higher standing. Okay, so usually it goes from low standing to higher standing. An individual or nation, either way, it's usually lower standing person or nation with higher standing person or nation. We're talking about a difference of status. Now, what is the difference with God's covenant with Abraham? It's because, number one, the greater initiates it. God is the one who initiates this covenant. So the greater initiates the covenant with the lower. Number two, usually there was often a symbolic way to initiate these covenants. They would take some sacrificial animals, they would cut them up in two halves and put one half on one side, on one half on the other side, and the person of lower status would go through the ground separating the two halves of the animals, and symbolically he's saying, if I don't keep this covenant, may I become like these animals, may I be split in two. Now, in the covenant with Abraham, who does the walking between the animals? Abraham prepares these animals, then he's put into a trance, and God comes down in a symbolic flame, and he's the one that passes between the animals, the cut up animals. God is putting on himself the responsibility of maintaining and keeping this covenant. If Abraham will be faithful, he will keep the covenant. God himself will make sure that Abraham and his descendants receive the promise as long as they remain faithful. So that's the reason why it's a little bit different right here. Now, at this time, I'm going to ask you a big favor. I'm going to ask you to please click on share and share now and help me get this story out to more people. I would appreciate that so very much. We have classes for you Monday through Saturday at 7 and 9. If it's 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock, doesn't matter, AM or PM, it's a great time to join us in a class from the 70 West Church of Christ. We have classes for young people on Fridays and Saturdays. We're working with Polishing the Pulpit to produce classes for you. The class on Friday is for boys and girls, and the class on Saturday is just for the girls. Do you have questions for me? Bible Investigation, which airs at 9 o'clock Monday through Saturday night, is all about your questions and Bible answers. Please email me at preachermichaelcox@hotmail.com. Have you downloaded my free app? I'm talking about Truth.fm. Great Christian programming at Truth.fm. Would you be interested in a Bible study, in a Bible correspondence study? We have a great one available for you. Please just email us at 70westbiblestudies@gmail.com. Have you received one of these? I'm talking about House to House, Heart to Heart. It's great Christian articles right here. If you didn't get one, email me your address, your mail address, and we'll get that sent to you. Or you can just drop by our office located at 948 Airport Road. Pick it up. We're open from Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. Now, at the 70 West Church of Christ, you're always a guest. We love to have people drop by. We have classes and we have worship services. Our worship services on Sunday, we have one for high-risk people at 7:45 in the morning. It's very safe. We have one at 10 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock. The 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock are live stream for your convenience. We also have a Bible study on Wednesday night at 7, likewise live stream on Facebook and YouTube. You're always a guest at the 70 West Church of Christ. Now, as we close out this message of hope, it is our hope, it is our wish, it is our prayer that each one of us will live for Jesus 24/7. May God bless.